Welcome to Trailhead DX Day 2. This is a session called Analytics Web SDK with an introduction to interoperating with Lightning, Visualforce, and more. My name is Skip Sauls. I'm a product manager for the analytics platform. What we do is things like SDKs, APIs, ALM, all the things that leverage the Force.com platform. And I'm going to let my colleague Smita here introduce herself.
Hello everyone, welcome to Trailhead DX. My name is Smita Kulkarni. I'm a software engineer with Analytics Cloud. I have been with Salesforce for a little over 8 years now, and it has been an amazing experience. Today in this presentation we'll be talking about Web SDK. We have some cool exciting demos for you. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. So you've probably seen this numerous times. We're obligated to put this up. We're going to talk about a few things today that may be kind of forward-looking, but most of what we cover today is actually in the summer 17 release, so you're able to actually use all of this now. And if we do talk about something that is forward-thinking, we'll call that out and talk about the futures. But again, don't make your purchasing decisions based on that. Quick agenda slide. We're going to talk about our developer experience, Einstein Analytics DX. And we're going to try to compete with all the cacophony around here. This is amazing, all the noise. I don't know if you guys are hearing all the music and everything else, but the audio is terrible. We're going to talk about a brief overview of the analytics assets. We'll talk about the SDK, and we'll have some great demos. So we'll focus a lot on demos and code rather than just on slides. So let's talk first about Einstein Analytics DX. So a couple quick questions here. Who here is familiar with Einstein Analytics, the product formerly known as Wave? Okay, so what we're doing is introducing our developer experience, which includes several pieces that leverage and tie us to the Force.com platform. As you may know, Wave and now Einstein Analytics actually run in the same data center as Force.com in what we call a superpod. And we leverage a lot of the platform features for things like metadata and APIs so that we can use all the great things you're already accustomed to in Salesforce. So when you're using it, the engine is running outside of the Force.com core, but it's running right next to it, inside of it, and leveraging a lot of the same features. So our developer experience leverages things like the metadata for the application lifecycle management, ALM, and we're also moving towards using all the great new things in Salesforce DX that you've probably heard some great things about in various sessions here at this conference. And then at the top here, we talk about platform integration being the APIs, being things like leveraging the sharing rules that we have inside of Force.com. And what we'll talk about today is some of the SDKs. And then finally down here at the bottom is how do you customize applications? Who here has built things with unmanaged and managed packages at Salesforce? So you're probably familiar with some of the restrictions you have on what you can do when you install something into orgs. Partners in particular will look to using templates as a way to provide dynamic apps. So if you're not familiar with Einstein Analytics, i.e. Wave, we're going to give you a very brief overview of what we think of as the assets that make it up. If you haven't seen a lot of the demos, this isn't really a marketing presentation, so we're not going to show you the product in depth there, but we'll talk about it in a general sense. So when we talk about how we get the data into the analytics engine, we use data sets as a way to represent that. And you can build data sets with graphical tools. You can map them to the Force.com objects. You can map them to external objects. You can bring pretty much any kind of data you want to into the engine. And you can use something called a data flow to help do so. Data flows allow you to do all the great transforms. They allow you to schedule it. And it basically runs and says, bring that data in from both Salesforce and from external systems, static files like CSVs, and turns that into something you can use in analytics. And then a lens, as the name implies, is a view onto a data set. So it gives you a way to say, let me look at this and interoperate with it graphically, using typically things like charts and tables. And on the back end, you're actually generating a query. We oftentimes refer to it as SAQL, the Salesforce Analytics Query Language. So that's being generated by this graphical view. And then the thing people are most familiar with are dashboards. And a dashboard is typically a collection of these views onto the data set. So You have one or more data sets. You can do different sorts of transforms. You have different kind of controls. You can do filters, selections, and that sort of thing, all inside of the dashboard. And that's the piece most people are familiar with if they've seen analytics running inside of Salesforce. And then an app is just a collection of these assets. So it's logically like a folder, and it's a way for you to organize things. It's not really a physical collection so much as it is a reference to it, but it's how we basically say make sense of it and make the user have it in focus. Sorry, is there audio problems? It sounds like it's really warbling a bit here. Is it clear to you guys? Okay, I hear lots of... Project like yell? Sorry, I'm a pretty vocal speaker, so I think this thing is not really suitable. So we have the apps, and then we have finally something we call templates, which is a way for you to create dynamic applications. And as we mentioned, if you're doing things like managed packages, you're probably familiar with the fact that there are some restrictions on what the end user can do in the so-called subscriber orgs. And templates give you a way to say, turn that app into something much more dynamic, which has things like variables and rules and expressions. And when the user installs it, they can then run through a wizard-like interface and configure it and so forth. And there's been a couple of cool sessions around that. They were yesterday, so if you missed that, maybe you can catch the recordings. So let's talk a bit about the Web SDK, which is our deeper integration with Lightning. And I'm going to have Smita here talk to you about that, about why we built it, how we built it, and what are some of the details.
Thank you, Skip. So, before I begin about what Web SDK is and what different features it provides, I want to take a step back and understand what was the requirement for this product. Traditionally, you can have an analytics dashboard. You can embed that dashboard into a Lightning app. You can interact with that dashboard by clicking on that dashboard. But if you have noticed, this is pretty much limited to one-way communication. The dashboard in turn cannot talk to or cannot respond to anything on that Lightning page. The dashboard doesn't have information on what exactly is on that Lightning page. And that is the limitation that we are trying to address here with the Web SDK product. Now with Web SDK, there are two communication channels that are open. One for the custom Lightning component within that Lightning app, they can communicate with the dashboard component, and the dashboard component in turn can interact with the custom Lightning components in the Lightning app. If you have noticed, these two communication channels, we need a medium for that communication. And in this case, we have chosen Lightning events as the medium for this communication. The reason we chose Lightning events is, first and foremost, it's the Salesforce standard. It's approved by security. And you can use Lightning events in different contexts like Lightning Out or Visualforce. So now let's look into what exactly this Wave SDK is and what feature it provides. So with the summer release for Web SDK, we are providing you with the two events. One is a Wave Update event, the event that is sent by external Lightning component to the Wave dashboard component, either to dynamically set a filter or interact with that dashboard with selection. And the second event is Wave Selection Changed event. Now this event is fired by the dashboard component to notify that the selection has changed. If you notice, both these events use the same communication channel to interact with the dashboard. Now let's look at each of these events in detail. The first is the Wave Update event. We call it an inbound event. When I say an inbound event, it's with respect to the dashboard component. It's fired by the external Lightning component to the dashboard component. And it can be for setting up a filter or interacting the dashboard with a selection. So to fire an event, we have to provide certain attributes. The first one is the ID. The external Lightning component needs to know which dashboard this event is meant for. The next is the type. What is the asset type this event is meant for? In our case, this is the dashboard. And the value is the actual payload JSON, which will have the information on what filter you want to apply to that dashboard. Now, how exactly that dashboard JSON, the filter JSON looks like, what fields it will have, we will cover that when we will come to the demo part of this presentation. And the second event that we have is an outbound event. It is fired by dashboard component to indicate that the selection has changed. And when this event is fired, the dashboard component, the event payload will have information about ID, which asset actually fired this event. In our case, this will be the dashboard ID. what is the type of that asset. In our case, it is dashboard because it's the dashboard firing that event. What action happened for this event, which is covered under verb. So in our case, it will be a selection because selection has changed, and that's why the dashboard is firing this event. And the payload will have actual information about what selection was it. So it will have the information about the step and the data involved in that selection. So these are the two events that with which you can actually now, the dashboard can start interacting with the external Lightning component, and the Lightning component can now start interacting with the dashboard. Now that we are acquainted with what exactly the Web SDK features are, let's move on to the demo part of this presentation. Skip will show you an interesting demo with which you can put these Lightning events to use.
Okay, thank you, Smita. So we're going to show a few demos here, and then once we've gone through the actual demo part, we're going to go into the code and show you how all this was put together. Everything you see here was built on the summer release, so it's all available in production. And we can make this sample code available to you if you'd like. Just let us know if you want to get a hold of it. It is pure sample code. It's just meant to show you how to use this. Who here is familiar with Lightning components and Lightning events? Okay. If you haven't gone through the trailheads and built some of this, some of the terminology may not quite make sense, but we'll try to make it clear to what's happening here and how they're interacting. In the past, as Smita said, you could go into things like Lightning App Builder, and in this case, we'll edit the page, and you could drag and drop a dashboard component onto it. Unfortunately, there's a problem. This component is actually a view onto the analytics dashboard, and it lets you pick from all the dashboards available, as well as setting some of the other attributes like a height, an initial filter, and so forth. And that was great for a lot of our users who wanted to embed a dashboard onto a page, but that was largely an island. It sat there and you could click inside of it, but you couldn't interact with the rest of the page. And a lot of times it meant going in and finding something on the analytics side, and then going back into the Lightning or the Salesforce Classic side and navigating, finding the same thing. So you had a not quite interactive experience there. Well, in this demo, we've also added a custom Lightning component here. This is built using Lightning, the Lightning design system, and Apex. And all it's really doing is running Apex queries based upon the fields and the object that's being specified. But it's also listening for the events that Smita mentioned, and it's going to take those events and change that query based upon it. And there's an additional component running on the details page, which is a headless component, which means it doesn't have a UI. And all it's doing is listening for events on the Lightning data service. If you're familiar with the Lightning data service, it underpins everything in Lightning, gives you a standard way to go off and get data from Salesforce without writing custom Apex. And it's going to listen for that and then fire events that the dashboard listens to. So we have a couple of components firing and listening to them, all working together. And these events allow us to do this in a way that doesn't require a bunch of hard coding. Now, we mentioned this in the context of Lightning Experience, but as Smita said, you can embed these same components into Visualforce pages and use them in Classic, and you can embed them into your external sites using Lightning Out. We take pride in the fact that we are fully Lightning certified. We've gone through and made sure everything works correctly in all the different contexts. So let's go back here now to the page. So if you've seen demos of Wave/Einstein Analytics in the past, you've seen the cool little transitions it does when you click and select and so forth. And in this case, when I click this, it's going to fire an event. And if you watch this, let me scroll up a little bit here. Watch the list at the bottom. That list is just a pure Lightning component that's listening for and reacting to the clicks inside the dashboard. So now we have a case where the dashboard is driving the Lightning UI. And let's go clear this out. In reverse, we can go and pick something like value proposition on stage, and we'll see the dashboard react to it. So now Lightning is driving analytics. So the two can interoperate by using these two events. We purposely kept the events very simple. We wanted to have just a couple of them with very simple payloads, make it very straightforward. However, if you're starting to use this and you say, we want to also do these things, let us know, because that's how we're going to grow this SDK over the next few releases. We're going to add more events more APIs, based upon what our users actually need. Because just blasting out a bunch of APIs isn't helpful if it just confuses the issue. So to show you how some of this works, let's bring up the Wave Event Monitor. Who here is familiar with the utility bar in Lightning Experience? Okay, see a few hands here. If you haven't seen this, you should play with it. It's pretty cool. You can make components that persist across all the pages inside of Lightning Experience, so you're not going to lose the context there. And when you click here, it pops open this thing called the Wave Event Monitor. We should call it now the Analytics Event Monitor. And when I click here, you'll see that payload being reflected in a list here. Now, this is not a business user component. You would never give this to a salesperson or marketing person and say, this is how you use it. This is purely for developers to learn this, which is why we're showing it to you guys. And again, you can have all this code and see how we take it. 95% of the code in this component is UI work. The actual work to process the event coming out of analytics is actually very simple, and Smith is going to walk through some of that for you in just a moment. And then in reverse, we mentioned how we can apply filters and selections on the inbound. So we have a filter test and a selection test, and these have a payload that basically says, I'm using this data set for opportunities, I'm using a field, which is stage name, and I'm selecting two different values, needs analysis and perception analysis, and I'm firing it for this dashboard here, which Smita mentioned is the dashboard you're targeting. So when I click fire, you'll see it react like so. And you can go in here and put in like null to clear it out. And again, this is not a business user tool, this is for devs, but you can see how the code works in real time. And similarly, you can do a filter, and the difference really is a selection is as if the user had clicked inside on something, selecting it. A filter says apply the filter before you display it. And we'll fire that, and we'll see the filter occur, and then we'll go clear this out again, like so. And I mentioned the headless component with the details view. I'm hoping this will actually fire and filter, we'll see, but in this case we can change this to, say, banking. And let's find one that actually has good data on it. Let's try technology. This is actually firing an event, but this data set may not actually have the right data to show it. Well, we'll have to show you the code for this instead. But this actually is tying it to the Lightning data service, so you know this is a real demo. We've actually broken it with a data set. But if this were working, you would see the dashboard reacting to it based upon that event being fired. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Smita, and she's going to show you some of the code behind this and see how this all ties together.
Okay, thank you, Skip. So now that we have seen how the demo and how you can put this Lightning events to use, let's learn about how exactly, what code we need to write to actually make this work. So I'm going to open...
Just go to the top and it'll pop down. There you go.
So I'm going to open a developer console, and let's start with one event at a time. So let's start with the inbound event. So if you remember that there was a pop-up Lightning component for filter test, and Skip applied some filter, click on the filter button, and the dashboard got filter. So this is that custom component called filter test. Don't worry about the amount of code that you are seeing on the screen. Most of it is for UI. The code that we need to actually fire an event is this part. We have an event called Wave Update. As we discussed earlier, it is an inbound event. We need to register this event. Now, if you remember, this event takes a couple of parameters. We need to provide those parameters before we fire that event. So the first parameter is the filter. What filter do we want to apply? This is how a typical filter JSON looks like. The filter JSON will have information about a data set, the data set on which this dashboard is based off, the information of a field, the field that you want to put a filter on, an actual value, the filter value that you want to apply. So this will be your filter JSON. You will be setting that filter JSON to the attribute value. Then you have to provide the value for the ID, which is in our case is a dashboard ID, because this event is meant for a dashboard. And the type is the dashboard, because this is the asset type is dashboard. That's why we have hard-coded it right now to the dashboard. And all we have to say is event.fire, and the event will be fired, and the dashboard component will react to it and update accordingly. So it's merely a couple of lines of code that we will have to write to make this event work. if you have noticed here, especially this part, we are here expecting that the custom lightning component should know about the dashboard. It should know what the dashboard ID is, what the fields that dashboard has, what filter I can apply on. But then with the winter release, we are making you available two events called describe and discover, with which the custom lightning component can find out the information about this dashboard at runtime. It can dynamically find out what dashboards are part of that lightning app, and also the information about the dashboard metadata. So the information that we are putting in here, you can apply it at the runtime and fire an event. So it will make that app even more interactive. So this is the code that is actually involved in making the inbound event work. Now let's move on to the outbound event. So if you remember, there was an event monitor app, event monitor component that Skip showed. Every time he used to click on the dashboard, the event monitor component used to get updated, and it used to display where the click happened. So again, most of the code is for the UI to make it look pretty, but the code that we are interested in is just this one line of the code. Here, we have to provide a handler for the event called Wave Selection Chain. This is our outbound event. And in our handler, all we have to do is get the parameters from that event, fetch out ID from those parameters, which will be the dashboard ID, and the payload, which will have information on what step was involved in the selection and what is the data that is associated with that step. And you can now use this data to perform the subsequent transactions. So this is how this is easy it is to actually fire an inbound event or receive an outbound event from a custom lightning component. Now I'll hand over, and this concludes the demo part of this presentation. Now I'll hand over the presentation to Skip for the concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Smita. So we hope you enjoyed the demos and looking into the code. We would also encourage you to try this out for yourself. You can go, for example, and get a DE org that has analytics enabled. There's some great trailheads. They're not really developer-centric at this point. We're working on some of those modules, hopefully for the Dreamforce timeframe. But if you've done some work around the various lightning trailheads and you've done the analytics trailheads, a lot of this sample code will make sense. Again, we've made it as simple as we could, so it's very easy. And we would like to see what you're building. And again, we encourage you to give us feedback through the success community, the partner community. Let us know what you're building, and let us know what you'd like to have additional, what additional events and APIs. We've got some great things in store, as Smita mentioned. And we also have things like Apex SDKs. If you're interested in doing server-side integration, you can actually call out to queries on the server side and use it in things like process builder flows and so forth. So please check out those. We're trying to build a great developer experience for you. And importantly, keep in mind that we are going to be leveraging all the great features you see in the platform, including things like Salesforce DX, as opposed to building a separate stack of things. So these will use the platform wherever possible. We think that's a great way to make it so that you as developers will feel comfortable when you start using analytics. We want you to think of analytics as being a natural part of an app, not as a separate thing that people go to. So please take a look at it and give us feedback where you can. And with that, we'd like to take some questions. If you'd like to ask them here, I think they might have a mic they pass around. And then we'll also be around afterwards in this area. And we have a demo booth over here called Einstein Analytics. Please come check that out. You can go into some of this code and see it in more detail, ask more questions. A lot of our dev team and architects are here, so feel free to interact with them. We brought pretty much the whole crew. And there's several of our developers who are actually in the audience here. And we'd like them to come up on stage right now and maybe take some questions with us. Are there any questions? Okay, do we have a mic?
Thanks. What additional licenses, if any, is required to build and also view the Wave dashboards?
So you have to have a Einstein Analytics license, and there's a couple different types of licenses. There's an apps license, and then there's a platform license. We as product people are not really supposed to talk about pricing and that sort of thing, so that's more of a discussion with like a salesperson or a partner representative. But there is an add-on license. It's not part of the base force.com. It is available in DE orgs though, so you can try it out for free. So we'd encourage you to try that out. Try out the Trailhead, which actually gives you a DE org that has a bunch of great sample data loaded in there, so you have enough in there to make the analytics useful and interesting.
On the outbound events, you can fire so the payload contains a selection that was made. Is it possible to get the results of a selection of something sent through?
So, what do you mean by results of the selection?
So for example, get the results of a particular step. If you had selection binding between something and another step in a lens in a dashboard that, say, had a filtered down list of accounts or something,
Right.
you want to fire that out in an event.
Actually, what this event does, it detects where the click has happened on the dashboard, and it uses that as the payload data. So now you can so now to take the subsequent actions, you know that which part in the dashboard I chose to click on it. Use that information to do the subsequent transaction. It is not giving you information of how the filtering or how the selection happened. It's more like where it happened.
I see. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, another question here.
How do we get? Oh my goodness! How do we get access to the code? How do we get access to the code?
So just email me directly. I'm ssalls@salesforce.com, as you saw on the slide.
Okay.
The slides will be published. I'll send you a managed or unmanaged package link with a bunch of Lightning components. You can take that and play with it. Just note that they are pure samples. There's no support, but they're there for the taking. And we've been giving the samples to various partners and letting them take them and run with them. And any questions you have, ask on the support community, the success community, and so forth. All right, any other questions? Okay, with that, we'd like to thank you very much, and we hope you enjoy the final day of Trailhead DX 2017. And again, please come and visit us and find us and ask questions. We're very passionate about this. We'd like to hear what you want to see. Thank you much.
Okay, thank you everyone.